This story was submitted by Taylor. This story takes place 5 years ago when I was 21. Not to talk myself up, but describing myself is important to the story. I was then, and still am, to some people, a decent-looking girl, in a kind of untraditional way. I am heavily tattooed, have piercings, dyed long bright red hair, Betty Page-style bangs, and am always done up in dramatic goth makeup. I'm easy to pick out in most crowds. At this time, I was working at a pawn shop, a job I loved, but that did come with the odd interaction with creeps. But this was more intense than usual. It started incoherently one day when the phone rang. My coworker and good friend answered the phone, but then after answering it, handed it to me. Nothing odd yet. A lot of regulars only talk to me. The man on the line said, "Are you the girl with the makeup and the long nails?" I answered yes. Then he went on, "My name is John. I was there today with my fiance and you helped us pick out our rings. We are so grateful and we want to give you a tip. Can we meet you when you get off and give you something?" I explained we couldn't accept tips, but the fact that they were so pleased was more than enough. That was the end of the call. I didn't remember this couple, but I help couples pick out rings all of the time, so it wasn't a red flag at the time. About 3 days later, I got another call from John. This time I answered with my usual greeting and heard again, "Is this the girl with the makeup and the long nails?" Again I replied, "Yes." "This is John. Do you remember me? I still just want to give you something. We just really want to give you something. Can you meet us in the parking lot behind your job after closing?" This time he seemed really desperate, and mentioning his fiancée seemed like an afterthought. I told him no very firmly, and hung up, since at this point, I didn't feel like being polite. I told my coworkers, and we all just shook our heads. The next day, something that I'm not sure that is related happened. A man said to one of my bosses, pointing at my employee picture, "That girl's pretty, but she's a real bitch." My boss, who I was secretly dating at the time, and was a bit protective over me, told me the story. I shrugged it off, figuring, who cares? The calls from John started coming daily, and when anyone else answered, they just told him I wasn't available. One time, I unfortunately answered, and I heard, "This is John. Do you remember me?" I explained that if he didn't need anything business related, he needed to stop calling. He then went on to tell me how good I looked, and described what I was wearing at the exact moment to a T. I felt myself go pale. Well, paler than usual, when it hit me. I do not know who this man is, what he looks like, or what his real name is. He could be in the store at any time and I would have no clue. I told my boyfriend and boss, and he promised to keep an eye out for anyone odd, and walked me to my car all nights that we closed together. The calls became angrier as each day went on, and sadly, at this time, our phones didn't have caller ID. I was so stressed. I was nervous helping any unfamiliar customer, thinking it might be him. I was certain at this point that there was no fiancé, and that whatever he wanted to give me was not a tip. Almost daily, he would call and describe to whoever answered what I was wearing and what he wanted to do to me, in a very rapey tone. Finally, my boyfriend, who looks and can sound very intimidating, told him in a pretty harsh way that if he ever saw him in the store, he'd kick his teeth in. A total bluff, since one, he's actually the nicest guy and wouldn't even hurt a fly, and two, We had no idea what this John looked like. The call stopped, and I was relieved. Then the night of our big Christmas sale 2 months later, when we were open very late, the phone rang. I answered. I just want to fucking give you something. I just want to give you an envelope. I just want to fucking come in an envelope and give it to you. You bitch. I hung up right then. It was just angry pervy babble, and it was the most aggressive call yet. He was full on screaming. I'm very upset because, well, walking to my car at midnight when my stalker was that angry didn't sound fun. When we did walk out, boyfriend by my side, my car was keyed to hell and back. I didn't care much about the damage because it was a '92 Saturn, but I knew it was him, and I knew that he knew what I drove, meaning that if he wanted to, he could follow me home. I was beyond stress for weeks, and it even took a toll on my health, but by some miracle, I never heard from John again. 5 years later, I have a new job, new car, and the same boyfriend. In the end, it was all right, but when I actually think about the situation, it was terrifying. To this day, when a man looks at me weird, I wonder if it's the infamous John. This story was submitted by Gage. I'm not 20 years old, and the only person I have told about this event is my best friend Dakota. It was around a week before spring break of my sophomore year in high school. I live in a small town where everybody knows everybody else. I was a well-known face around school for my hijinks, some good and some bad, depending on who you ask. I was late for class, as usual, since for some reason I could not, and still don't understand, I always get the locker that jams. It's been that way since 6th grade. I got cocky putting my English book in my locker, and had to rush to my class after finally retrieving it. The only other students in the hall were a group of freshmen and a few juniors talking about the upcoming JV football game. I pushed through the crowd, bolting to get to the other side of the building to my class. There was a 4-minute window between classes, after which a chime would sound, making you tardy. As I sped around a corner, I ran into someone, knocking them over. I apologized and helped the person up, handing them the book they had dropped. The person I knocked down was a girl in a class under myself. I simply bolted off, letting out another abrupt apology. I made it to class, and afterwards it was lunch break. I would always sprint on breaks, wanting to just let out my nervous energy. On this run, however, I noticed another person who tried to run beside me, but I quickly left them in my wake. It was in the cafe, where I saw the girl from earlier. She didn't speak or move. She just gazed at me with this eerie, hollow gaze. She started to follow me to every class, and would walk so close I could feel her breathe on my hair, which at the time was twice its length as it is now. I would find stacks of letters and notes stuffed into my locker. My locker had even been opened, and a pair of girls' underwear was hanging on my coat hook. I was disgusted, and quickly tossed them in the trash as discreetly as I was able. The following week I had caught the flu, and ran into the men's room to get sick. I was in the second stall, which had a broken latch, when I heard footsteps behind me. I figured it was another guy who had to relieve himself. I wiped off my mouth and stood up. As I turned to exit the stall, my stalker was right there. She was within feet of me, with a huge grin on her face. I was there, alone, and cornered by some crazy girl. She used her nail file to jam the latch and started to wrap her arms around my waist. I resisted, and she shoved me against the wall, my head hitting the tiles behind me. I persisted to resist when she loosened her clothes and said, "If I scream for help right now, what do you think will happen?" in a cold, calculating voice. I panic crawled under the first stall to my left and bolted from the bathroom. She proceeded to message me on Facebook, filling my inbox to the brim with love letters and asking why I didn't want to play with her in the bathroom. I tried to tell the principal, but she simply said, "It'll go away." Before I could tell her about the bathroom, she instructed me to return to class. Thankfully, it stopped as quickly as it had begun, and she hasn't bothered me since. I can only imagine what the next guy is going through, though. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. I'd like to thank everyone submitting their stories into me, and please, I urge you to keep doing it, because this channel does run off of all your stories. I'm also trying to stockpile on stories because I will be going on holiday soon, so I'd like to pre-record a few videos so that way you guys don't go without. So if you would like to submit your story, please look in the description for all the information on how to do so. So now for my view on the stories. In the first story, I'm surprised her boyfriend actually held his composure that long. I would expect him to probably flip out a little sooner, given the Italians, and I know how they respect their women a lot, and they will fight a lot for it. I'm glad that everything worked out, especially in both these cases, both the people just disappeared. She made a very smart choice by letting everyone know what was going on. Far too often, people won't say anything thinking it'll just go away and that they can handle it, and it doesn't go away and it turns out they can't handle it. So it's always wise to fill in your coworkers, friends, and significant other if you feel like you might be being stalked. So now for the second story. That one was a little different, because you don't hear very many stories of men getting stalked. Once again, I'm happy that this person disappeared, but I can only imagine what a child's going through already going through school and having to deal with these real-world problems. Because even back in grade school, you still have crazy people. In both of these instances, I'm happy everything turned out, and I'm hoping that those people got the help they needed or found the person that was their perfect match. Because everyone's got a perfect match, whether you're crazy or not. Don't give up. Don't give up. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.